Hey again, everybody, and welcome back to Loose Wheels, the auto racing podcast of CentralMaine.com. I'm Travis Barrett. I am the auto racing writer at the Kennebec Journal and the Morning Sentinel. It's Father's Day weekend coming up, and so we're going to take a look at some guys who have strong family ties in racing. We're going to catch up with Wyatt Alexander. He's a former Rookie of the Year at Wiscasset Speedway, now living in Charlotte, where he's going to school. He's a third-generation driver out of Ellsworth. His family has been involved in it all over the state of Maine. And then we're going to catch up with six-time Pro All-Star Series champion Johnny Clark, and we're going to talk a little bit about what he's been up to this year. Certainly going to talk about the Oxford 250, and we're going to talk about his Father's Day weekend plans as well. Look, love to have you along every week. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Make sure you follow me at tbarrettgwc. Also follow at Central ME Sports, and keep up to date with auto racing in Maine this summer, and also all the sports going on here in Central Maine. But we're talking about auto racing, as always, on Loose Wheels, and we're going to jump right into it here with Wyatt Alexander. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Travis, and we have on the phone all the way from, I bet it's a lot warmer in North Carolina than it is in Maine, but we have Wyatt Alexander with us. Wyatt, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Travis.
How have you been? It's been a while since you were in Maine on a daily basis.
I've been pretty good. Very, very busy lately.
Yeah.
It has been a while. Been here almost a year now. It'll be a year in August. So it's been very busy. It's flown by. At times it felt like it was dragging along with my freshman year of college, but pretty quickly it stepped up, and I can't believe it's almost been a year.
Yeah, it's take me back to the decision to move south, to go to school in the south. What played into your decision, and in the end, was it a difficult decision for you?
It was difficult in some ways, but it was a no-brainer. The physically moving part, is not always easy. It's quite a process, but in the back of my mind, I knew it was something I really wanted to do, and I've been doing for a really long time. So it certainly made it worth it. And it hasn't been easy. I've been taking on a lot very quickly. Full-time student, still trying to race, part-time jobs. So it's been difficult, but, I'm living a dream. So I feel very fortunate to be where I am. And at the end of the day, it's certainly worth it. And it's a lot of hard work, but I'm loving it.
Tell me a little bit about your racing. I feel like, when I first met you, a few years ago, and you were doing the legend stuff, you were racing a ton. You probably felt like you were racing every week, probably more than that on some occasions. But your schedule, the racing schedule for you has slowed a little bit. Is that, maybe kind of give us a map of what your summer racing plans are and how you've kind of adapted to that?
Yeah, it's certainly been a little bit difficult. I won't lie. I want to be in the race car as much as I can. And, you look back to, even before I met you, but when I raced go-kart, and we were all over the place all the time. Then I got into a Legends car, and we had to sit and say, okay, financially, it's a little more difficult to do that. Mm. So, but, we still made it happen on a fairly regular basis. And then I got into a late model and was like, okay, now we're really going to sit back and look at things. And racing weekly at Wiscasset there for a while was awesome. And then we kind of wanted to step out of our comfort zone and do more touring races, which has been great, but it's just tough because along with that is, greater financial burden, I guess you could call it. Not really that it's a burden, but it's just more difficult to do. So I've been out of the race car a little bit more than I hoped to be, and with this move and being further away from Maine, it certainly didn't make it any easier. But, I talked to my parents and our sponsors, and we were able to come up with a pretty stout schedule. It's been a slow start just because I've still been wrapping up school, but hopefully after this coming weekend, the Speedway 95, it'll pick back up, and I'll be back in Maine a few times, and we'll be running, the rest of the summer and into the fall.
Yeah, you kind of stole my thunder there. I was a little bit knowing that. So the race cars are still in Maine. I don't know if everybody knows that, but so even though you're in North Carolina, the family still has the race cars here in Maine. I was a little bit surprised to see your name on the Pro All-Star Series entry list this weekend at Speedway 95, but I also wasn't totally shocked. Have you what are your thoughts going into this weekend? Are you at a point in your career when you go into a race like this one and say, this is my goal for the weekend?
Absolutely. It's been difficult because, my rookie year at Wiscasset, we did, quite well. Won the Boss Hog, won Rookie of the Year, went to some pass races, and a couple of them were competitive, and a couple others we struggled. But that was to be expected. And then the 2 years since then have been really difficult because I honestly had higher goals or higher expectations. And it's not that we didn't do well. We had some wrecks, and some that were my fault, and some that were out of our control, and some weekends that were just really tough. And you'll have that in racing. So it's been a little discouraging, but we've been working really hard, and I feel like, we're just kind of climbing that hill and waiting to get to the other side of it. So I hope this weekend is an indication of that. I have goals of running strong, and, we've had some top 10 runs going in past races or been a potential to be a top 5 caliber car, and something happens or, we've had difficulties. So I'm still pursuing that. I think we are a strong team, and that we have potential to certainly be in the top 10, and if things go the right way, and we can improve upon that. But that's my goal for the weekend. Is I think we can go into 95 and be there, be a strong competitor. I like the longer races, like the past races, because the race can kind of come to me. That's my driving style. So if I can play my cards right, and I think we'll have a great race car. We have all year so far. So if we can play to our advantage, I think we'll be just fine.
I wonder if I know you've made a few starts down there in the Southeast, and I wonder, is there anything that kind of jumps out at you as a difference in racing in New England versus racing down south? And I wonder if some of it is just a kind of a cultural difference. I always, maybe I should preface that by saying I feel like in all the travels I've done, all the races I've covered in the South, I always felt like racing in the South was always a little bit more cutthroat. Those guys, it's not that they take it more seriously, it's just I always felt like they tend to look out for themselves a little bit more. Is that fair? Have you noticed any of that?
Yeah, I certainly have. Obviously growing up in the Northeast, growing up racing in the Northeast, growing up going to past North races. I've been around racing in the South a little bit, but not certainly at this level.
Yeah.
So, I was a little hesitant because I've heard people say exactly that, and honestly, when my family came down, I was already here to run the Easter Bunny this year, I was very nervous. And I didn't really tell many people that, but I was very nervous. I was like, are we just going to walk all over? Am I ready for this? I had no idea. So, and, a couple of people told me that it was a problem. I had confidence in the fact that a lot of the past North guys that come down here usually do very well. Ben, DJ, you name it, Travis Benjamin, it doesn't really matter. Dave Farrington, the list goes on. So I figured, well, not that on a regular basis I beat those guys, but when we come to the past North races, I can always handle them, it's not like they're out of the ballpark. So that gave me some confidence, and then once we got here, I felt really good. Once we got on track at Hickory and all that, the weekend went fairly well until we ended up with a wrecked race car in the feature. But same with Orange County, I was really nervous, especially Orange County is a big, fast racetrack. We just had a crate motor, and I thought, man, I'm going to be eaten alive. Not that I didn't have confidence in the race car or the team. I was just nervous, drive what it takes. So, but Dean Clattenburg, my car builder and part-time employer, has given me a lot of confidence. Not just him giving me confidence by telling me I'm going to do all right, but just his knowledge and the quality of race cars that he builds has given me confidence because, his race cars go great everywhere they go, it seems like. So I have a little bit off the question, but yes, it is a little different, but I've quickly developed some confidence in the fact that, we're all right, and even though the culture is a little different, it's still racing. Everybody's out there trying to do the same thing, and these guys are a little bit more cutthroat, but at the end of the day, I don't think they're any better drivers or any better cars or equipment. I think, the guys from the Northeast, in my opinion, are some of the best in the country. So I feel like if I can go on with those guys, then I'll do just fine down here.
Yeah. So you and I getting off topic, imagine that. Tell me about the Valvoline Fast Track to Fame. I go to Wiscasset Speedway, I see a giant pickup truck parked right next to the fence, and I see the entire rear window taken up with a decal that says "Vote for Wyatt," and I said, "That's got to be Wyatt's dad." It was. I did confirm that it was your dad. Would you tell me about the program and kind of how you got involved and what people can do to help you out?
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting. I got class, like I am today at school and here at UNC Charlotte, and my dad texted me about this competition, and I've been involved in some other things like the Quickie Driver Development Program. I've been a semifinalist in that and gone through that process. So I was fairly familiar with the contest type format, looking for sponsorship, things of that nature. So my dad texted me and told me I should register for it or whatnot. So honestly, at class one day, I sat down with my laptop in the hallway and typed up a quick biography and submitted it. And they review it and then accept it and put it on their website. So following that was a fan vote, and I posted it on my Facebook page a couple times. Didn't think a ton of it. It was like 800 or so entrants. So I thought, that was great, but what am I pants this year? So, in all honesty, I posted up there a couple times, and way better feedback than I could have ever hoped for. I ended up becoming a finalist. They did, so through that fan vote, they selected, I don't even know what it was, to say the top 10 or so, I think, something along those lines, and then from there it went to a committee, and they chose the final 4. So now we're back to a fan vote. It is down to myself and 3 other contestants from all over the country, different disciplines of racing. So until July 3rd, people can go on the Valvoline website, and there's a link that takes you to the Fast Track to Fame portion, or you can find it directly on my Facebook page. But you go on there and do a quick account with Valvoline, and you can vote for me once a day until July 3rd. So there's a great grand prize, and they actually the first through 4th, I'll get different level of prize package. So it's a pretty awesome deal. Pretty exciting just to make it this far.
Yeah, it is. I'm always amazed at whether it's you talked about the Quickie Driver Development Program or something like this Valvoline Fast Track to Fame. It's always amazing when you see people that and like you said, you get hundreds and hundreds of entries, and it gets whittled down to 4 choices, and you go, hey, I know that guy. To me, it's always like,
right?
Like it does seem like it's a bit of a needle in a haystack to get to this point, but hey, now that you're in it, you might as well win it, right? You got to put yourself in position.
Right?
You got to put yourself in position at the end.
Exactly.
Let me ask you, if we look 3 or 4 years down the road, you graduate from UNC Charlotte, what do you hope to be doing? What do you hope to be doing in 5 years?
I think about that every single day. I've got a lot of options. My goal in moving here and pursuing my education was to open doors for myself, because I'm 18 years old, and I've always loved racing and wanted to be in racing. To an extent, I wasn't sure, every kid who's being a NASCAR driver, and the way the sport is tough to get into in that aspect right now. So realistically, I said, okay, I can move to Charlotte, and maybe a door would open in that sense. I could get myself into a race car down here, but I need to look for my education as a solid backup plan. So I'm here studying mechanical engineering technology. And I think with that degree, I could do a variety of things. I could stay here in Charlotte, and I could try and work for a race team, or I could stay here in Charlotte and work for a number of engineering firms, or I could move anywhere in the country and do it. If I wasn't going to be in Charlotte, I would most likely definitely be back in Maine. So there's a lot of great companies in Maine I could work for. There's a lot on the table right now. I've got a couple years. Hopefully in the fall, I'll start doing some internships, but I've got a couple years to think things over. But the bottom line is I want to keep racing. So Depending on where my career education takes me, I'd like to still be in a race car as much as possible. So there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of doors that'll hopefully be open and stay open. There's a lot being thrown at me already, and it's a little bit intimidating, but it's exciting. I guess it's better than the alternative. So I have a lot of options. I'm not sure exactly where I'll land, but it's been a whirlwind so far. So we'll see where it takes me.
It sounds like you've given up on your dream of your first love of playing striker for Manchester United. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, so I won't lie. I got down here and, the school is a great soccer team, and I knew that they have a phenomenal soccer team. I knew that was just totally out of the question. But they have an intramural soccer team, so I thought, I'll play some soccer when I get down here. And I got so busy so quick doing so many other things that I was so bummed come wintertime that I never got onto the soccer team. So that's my goal for this fall, to at least, a few times go kick around the soccer ball, because I miss it. So it'll be this fall. It's been, it'll be 2 years. So I was blown away that it's been that long. So I surely miss that for sure.
Well, my career ended 3 years ago when I went over to a indoor league in Waterville. It was a pickup night, and I'm thinking, no big deal. A bunch of old guys just kicking the ball around, and then the Thomas College season had ended a couple of weeks before that, and so half a dozen of those guys showed up, and I thought I was going to die. Yeah. So I said, I think I'm retiring at 40 years old. I think it's finally time to put that dream to bed.
Yeah. I my senior year of high school, I played soccer, and I hurt my back in preseason, not severely, but I just couldn't get right back on the soccer field after that. So I was really bummed, because anybody that knows me well enough knows that soccer was, racing and soccer. That was it. So it's been 2 years, and I'm itching to get back to it. But I know I'm going to be so out of shape that it's not even going to be fun. So I'm a little intimidated, but I want to get back to it. I brought all my soccer stuff with me to Charlotte, but it's been in a tote since we got here.
Well, I was going to, first of all, as a striker, any excuse to have an injury, you're going to, so I'm not surprised to hear you say, I hurt my back, I can't go. And secondly, as a striker, you don't even need to be in shape to be a striker. Let's be honest, those guys don't do any work, all right?
Oh, that was even better. I've been a striker my whole life, so back when I played, U11 or whatever it was at the time, whatever the fun at the time, before they even introduced offsides, I would just stand down there
just stand there and wait.
And wait for the ball to come. That was the most fun soccer ever was.
Spoken like a true striker. Listen, Wyatt, I want to say thanks for taking some time to chat. It's great to catch up with you, and best of luck this weekend at Speedway 95. I hope you have a good run.
Thanks. I greatly appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to it, and I feel pretty good about it. So we'll see how the weekend goes.
Thanks to Wyatt again for coming on. If you want to check out that Valvoline program where he is one of the 4 finalists, it is valvoline.com, Fast Track to Fame. You can find it there. It's got the bios of all 4 of the finalists from all over the country. And like Wyatt said, I think you can vote every day right through July. So let's give the Maine boys some love. One of 2 New Englanders who are the final 4 in that program, which is kind of neat. We always say we have really great auto racing here in New England, and we certainly do. So thanks again to Wyatt. Look, I want to rant a little bit here. I want to talk a little bit about safety. This week, of course, is the anniversary of Jason Leffler's death. He died in a sprint car crash in New Jersey. Left behind a young son at the time. Really a sad story. I mean, he's a guy who's been in all the NASCAR National Series over the year, but also, again, was a sprint car driver at heart. Really was all over short tracks. And I feel like every time one of these things happens, we talk about safety. We talk about safety on the short tracks, and it kind of gets a buzz and gets some play for a week or two, and then it disappears. And, one of the things that always grabs me is the number of guys you see wearing outdated fire suits, no gloves, no racing shoes, And I think when you're a weekly racer, right, and you're the lifeblood of some of this stuff, I think it's easy to say, well, the track doesn't mandate this or the track doesn't mandate that, but you got to make safety your own priority, right? You can't rely on other people to do it. I remember right around the year 2000, there was a crash at Thompson Speedway, and Ted Christopher and Bo Gunning were involved in it, and they were as fierce rivals as you could find. I mean, it's I wish I could think of something more locally to kind of put it in perspective. It'd be if you saw Mike Rowe and Ralph Nason battling at the primes of their careers. I mean, Bo and Ted were both in the championship hunt. They were really, really good race cars in the modified division at Thompson that year, and Bo's car caught on fire, and Ted went and helped pull him out. He was on the track at the time, right, and helped pull him out before the safety crews could get there. And I remember at the time Ted was talking about, well, I hate the guy, but I don't want to see anybody burned, catch on fire. So he pulled him out. But I think one of the things that Teddy had said not long after that was basically like, if you can't afford the safety equipment, you can't afford the race. And I think it's true. If you can't afford to update that stuff, you got to reevaluate, man, because buying a top of the line fire suit, gloves, and shoes, and having a fire extinguisher on board your car is going to cost you a lot less in the long run than a week in a burn unit somewhere. So I really want to see guys take safety to the next level, right, and make it about themselves. Make it just do whatever you can, guys. Be safe, because we've seen too many people that we know and care about severely injured or even killed in race cars, and it's the gruesome side of the sport, but it exists, man. It's one of the reasons that everybody likes it. It's dangerous, it's exciting, and it's always been that way, and it always will be that way. But I think there's stuff people can do to really make sure that they kind of limit the chance that stuff's going to end up catching them. So please, guys, take safety seriously. Please, 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 because as we're going to find out here with our next segment, family. People have families, right? We've grown up, and when we talk to Johnny Clark, you're going to hear from him. He talks a lot about how having a couple of little girls has really changed his perspective on life, and really happy to catch up with Johnny. I've known Johnny for a long time, and I remember young Johnny. Johnny was always fired up about racing, race cars, race car politics, and but he's in a different place in his life now, and the six-time past North champion has won more than 30 races in his career. He's taken a little bit different approach, but one thing still remains the same for Johnny. He's still looking at that Oxford 250 at the end of August as the one thing he'd really like to check off his bucket list. So here's Johnny Clark on this week's Loose Wheels.
Johnny, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's good to talk to you.
Podcast, that's awesome. That's like the new age of like interviewing or something, or
that is. I think actually back when you were winning all those championships, I don't even think they existed.
No, they didn't.
We had message.
You feel old.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So it's So I want to talk. Let's start right off. So what are you doing this year? Because I've seen your name show up on some pass finishes. I've seen your name show up at Oxford Plains Speedway in some weekly results. What exactly are you up to this summer?
Just taking it race by race, and if we feel like going, we're getting things ready and going to the track. But just there was no real agenda to the season other than our main goal is to get ready for the Oxford 250. I mean that's basically it's our biggest race of the year, and Oxford being an hour away from here, there's no reason to not go and hit up some weekly shows. Our flat track program has definitely suffered the last few years. So we're just trying to get back on track and find some speed. We were better last time out in the weekly show, so hopefully we're on the right track now.
I think I'm always, and granted, you and I've known you for a long, long time, and I always wonder when I think it was in 2015, you kind of took a segment of the summer off. Things weren't going well for you. You came back and you won the 300 at Beechridge that September. you always seem to find a way to turn time off into a benefit for you. How hard is that to do?
I don't think it's really that hard to do. It just, back then we had a big problem. We were going three laps down in a race. I mean, we were terrible.
Mm.
So when you're that bad, it's not hard to say there was a problem and step aside from it. I mean, everyone does this because they've got a competitive bug in them, and I don't have to win every race.
Right.
It's nice to, but I want to feel like I'm competitive.
Yeah.
In a race.
Yeah.
So when you're that bad, it's easy to say, all right, something's going to give here. I mean, having a family now and my girl's getting older, it's easier to step back and say, I just feel like I can get pulled in so many different directions that every now and then, racing's going to be the first thing to hit pause on now. And if I can spend that extra time instead of going to the racetrack, working on my race car, working on the program overall, and making it more competitive, to just have more fun next time you go back to the track. So.
Let me ask you it this way then. Would you, back in 2010 and 2011, you won basically half the races. I think you won 12, and over 2 years you won like 12 out of 26 races. In 2011, you won 7 out of 14 races. At that time, could you ever have imagined that you would have willingly embraced time off away from the racetrack?
Well, 2010, I didn't have kids.
Yeah, right.
So, this changed everything. My, outlook on life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I was, I guess, 29 or 30 years old at the time.
Yeah.
Just it seems like quite a while ago now.
Yeah.
But
I know. Yeah.
I mean, hey, if I can only run 6 races competitively, then that's what I've got to do.
Yep. Yep.
I just don't have the time to put into it like I used to.
Right.
I wish I did.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I struggle with it mostly because racing seems to be, heading in a direction that saddens me. That fan-wise and everything, that I wish that we had higher car counts. So it's hard for me to take time off, but if I got to do what I've got to do, it's best for me and my family and the race program.
Yeah. But I think it's funny because I remember, if I go back to those really dominant championship years of yours, boy, you were so driven, just everything. You were so focused, and it's fun now to. I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, I had called you prior to the Oxford 250, like that week, starting to do stories on the 250, and you and I ended up talking for like 20 minutes about like. Vacation spots for our family. You were like, oh, you've got to check out this place on the coast. Take the family camping. And I hung up the phone and I thought, man, that's a conversation he and I never would have had 6 years ago.
Yeah, we'll be doing good to qualify for that race.
Yeah, right. So it is everything you've done, right? All the races you've won. This morning I looked at a list of some of the tracks you've won at, and it's all over New England. It's southern New England. It's even Greenville, Pickens. It's Canada. How much does
look at the should have would have?
Yeah, right. Well, see, I knew you would, but I was going to ask you, how much does not having won the Oxford 250 still does that eat at you a little bit, or are you or does it? With everything you've done, do you kind of look at it and like, hey, you can't have an A+ day every race you go to?
No, it does bug me a little bit, and I'll tell you that's exactly why I can't run past weekly, or run the full tour, because I do want to concentrate on bettering the program to be competitive at the Oxford 250 and give us the best shot that we can have at this time. I mean, if we could go back to the Oxford 250 run it from 2008 to 2011, which of course we know there wasn't Super 8 models.
Right.
But if we could, maybe would have, should have, and it would have been could have happened, because man, we were so good back then. But, so if like I said, I mean, it keeps coming down to I get to just do what I can with the time I have, and it's pretty much, when July and August gets here, it's going to be racing Oxford weekly and just giving ourselves the best shot we can for the 250.
Yeah. It seems to me that Oxford, granted, you have not had, you've been in position to win that a couple of times, right? You didn't get the luck. I mean, I think, was it 2005 that Mike caught you there towards the end? I mean, you were in a great spot in that race.
Yeah. It was like 10 laps shy of winning.
Yeah,
I mean, it was crazy, and it came down to a spinning lap car, multi-laps down. We're not going to mention any names.
Right. Well, you have matured.
So, he still races too. It's so hard. I can't even look at him.
Oh.
So I'm so tired from last night. I didn't sleep.
Welcome to family life, man. Welcome to family life. Yeah.
Life.
Well, no. So I was just saying. So I think you've won the 300 a bunch of times. You've won extra distance races in Canada. You haven't had the luck necessary in the 250, though you've been close. You just haven't gotten the right break. I wonder, is it just as simple as, hey, I haven't had the luck at that racetrack and I haven't had the fastest car over the last couple of years, or is there truly something different to winning 250 laps at Oxford than in other places? Do you see what I'm kind of getting at?
I get what you're saying, but I don't really necessarily think so.
Yeah, I don't either.
There wasn't anybody better than we were back in that time frame. And I drag it back to 08, 08 to 11.
Yep.
That was better than us at winning extra distance races.
Yeah, I remember.
And I think it's because nobody prepared better than we did.
Yeah.
And let's face it, we had speed, and it just seemed to do so good in the extra distance races. And it looked like we were nowhere to be found in the first 100 laps. And then could either dominate the second half or just come in the last 50 laps and would say steal one, but we were doing it. We did so much of it. We won 250s, 300s everywhere.
Yeah.
At Oxford. I don't think, Oxford is a little bit different than the other tracks, but I think in how you go about winning the Oxford 250 versus any other 250, I think it's the same.
Yeah, I think a lot of guys, a lot of teams, I hate the term saying, they beat themselves, but I think a lot of people focus so much on all the practice, all the cars, qualifying, that they sort of forget that at the end of the day, the 30-plus fastest cars on the property are almost always going to make the race. And you can look at the last half decade, and that's certainly been the case. There's not the surprises there used to be in terms of qualifying. And but I think a lot of teams have just simply forgotten that at the end of the day, you just got to win a 250-lap race. I think this aura, in some ways, totally psychs a lot of teams out before 2 p.m. on Sunday even shows up.
I would agree with that. And I think I've been guilty of that. I think mentally, the Oxford 250, there's nothing like it. And, I've raced the Snowball Derby, the Oxford 250, so through, south to north, and when I've gone to the Snowball Derby, it was having fun, and we were competitive during those years. The Oxford 250, I think everyone puts so much stress on themselves and their teams that, like I said, you can forget what the end goal really is, and you can take yourselves out of contention. And I'll tell you, I did that in 2003 at the Big Dog. Here we went to Wisconsin paying $100,000 to win in 2003.
Right.
totally psyched myself out.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew there was a huge chance that we could win that thing.
Yeah, sure.
And win $100,000.
Yeah, yeah.
We qualified second in time trials. I was leading the first 100 laps of the race. The race was 400 laps long, right? 400?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
We shouldn't even been trying to race if we'd gone 3 laps down in the first 100 laps.
Right. It's true. It's totally true.
Like, I look back then, like, what were you doing fighting for the lead? And I remember being in the car and driving my guts out on lap, 75.
Oh, my word.
And it just put us, mentally I wasn't there, and we ended up getting caught up in a wreck. Cassius lost his tire, and I jumped in. But
wow.
you look back at that, look how many people psyched themselves out in that race. There were 7 cars that finished it. It was crazy. All you should have been doing was trying to finish the race.
Yeah, just be around, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, I think after that, it was a lesson to me that, you first, to win a race, you got to finish it.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of corny to say, but it's so true.
Oh, it's so true. It's so, one of the things I don't want to get off topic, but I know one of the things that people always say to me, why do you love the Coastal 200 so much? And I said, because they're weekly drivers who all insist that you have to be patient and you have to be around at the end. And then every year without fail, they go out and they run each other over for the first 75 laps. Like they've all forgotten everything they've been told.
Sure.
It's true.
Sure. Yep. And, when you're talking to 200 lap race, there's a game that's going to happen in the first 50 laps. Good.
Yeah.
That's going to help you win that race.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
You can certainly take yourself out of contention.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Oxford 250 aside, is there anything that you have not done in racing that you wish you had a chance to do?
Oh.
It's really open-ended.
Yeah, it is. I always dreamt of making a living in racing.
Right.
And from a young kid, and I obviously know that at 38 that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. After being involved with the Gong Show back in 2005, trying out and seeing what it was like, they were so consumed. The NASCAR drivers, they are today.
Yeah.
So consumed in what they do for a living, it's hard. I mean, are you willing? I remember Ricky Craven telling me, asking me in 2005, are you willing to sacrifice what's needed to do this, to make a living?
Yeah.
And I never really understood what he meant.
Right.
I was 25.
Yeah.
And I now know, and I think that was certainly easier for him to step back when he did. The wife and kids at home.
Yeah.
And it's huge. It's such a huge sacrifice. Looking back at it now, I'm not. Of course, it would have been a dream come true. It would have been everything. But look at Carl Edwards. Jumps out of a car.
Yeah.
Announces he's done. It's a job at the end of the day.
Right.
Of course, you want to do something you like. Or love. For a living. But I don't know if it would have ever been worth the sacrifices to make a living.
Yeah.
So you asked, the question was, I feel like I left anything on the table, right, in my career?
Well, no, I didn't, but yeah, I like that answer. I was really more like, is there a race you'd love to enter, or is there a car you'd like to get in before you're all done? That's where I was really going with it.
Not necessarily. I mean, I could throw out, like Winchester to be a fun track to go to, but I've been fortunate enough that with a family business that my family's so involved that we toured around a lot, and I still want to do that. I still want to. This is it. It's all about quality and not quantity of races.
Yep.
And if I can have a better prepared car and hit up some bigger races instead of just saying, I'm over the fact of just saying, here we go, we're going to another race this weekend.
Right. Do your girls like it?
My girls haven't been overly exposed to racing. I'm in the shop. They know.
Sure.
They know that Dad goes racing, and
Sure.
my 6-year-old probably struggles with it a little bit.
Yeah.
Wanting Dad home on the weekend.
Sure.
It's tough, you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I'm going to Speedway 95 this weekend. It's Father's Day, and I'm right there. I'm torn because it's Father's Day.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I'm like, oh, it's Father's Day, so I get to do what I want to do, but I want my girls with me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No, it's hard.
That's probably, you know, at 6 and 4, that's not their idea of a great.
Really, that's weird. I can't.
And so I'm just gonna wake up Saturday morning and trick them into thinking that it's Sunday.
Well, they're still young enough. I think you can do that.
Right.
What happened to Saturday? Oh, it was magical. It was gone. It just disappeared. Yeah, I like that. That's a good trick. It's a good trick. Listen, I think that's a good place to end. I really appreciate you doing this and taking a couple minutes. I know you're busy, but it's good to catch up with you. And I have a sneaky suspicion. I'll see you before too many more weeks pass here.
Good deal.
Hey, have a good day and enjoy the rest of your week, and good luck this weekend.
Thank you, Travis.
You bet.
Thanks again to Johnny for doing it. He's been busy. You know, that Clark's car crushing business has taken off. They got 3 locations now, and he's been working down in Jay, he told me, where they just opened another location recently. So he's been a busy man. Again, it's funny when he talks about the Gong Show. I remember that. Oxford 250. I think it was he ran the Oxford 250 that night. That was the year he finished second to Mike. And then the next morning he was on a plane and doing the Jack Roush driver development program. That was really kind of the beginning of driver development programs, if you remember. That was like kind of the beginning of these competitions, these very same competitions that we find somebody like Wyatt Alexander involved in now. So thanks to Johnny for doing the podcast this week. Thanks to Wyatt for doing the podcast this week. Best of luck to both guys. They'll both be at Speedway 95 on Sunday for the Pass 150. Should be a great day. Looks like the weather's going to be good this weekend. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. If you're not a father yet, but you have a father, which I think biologically you probably have to, just wish your dad a happy Father's Day. It'll mean a lot to him. And don't forget, at TBarrettGWC, centralmaine.com/sports, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, everybody. Thanks again. That's another edition of Loose Wheels in the Book. We will talk to you next week.